Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to talk mental health with amazing humans. For this episode, I'm really happy to introduce one of my really good friends, Ivan Lantivy. Ivan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And thank you for accepting the invite, more importantly. This is the Podathon episode 22. I can't believe we're almost there. We got the end in sight, but this is just another wonderful opportunity to sit down and have another conversation. Ivan and I have known each other for quite a long number of years, actually. We worked together in a past role, and there's quite a few people I've managed to persuade to do these conversations from past experiences and past roles with me. But Ivan and I were in the same team, so we got to know each other very well during that time. But interestingly, the story that he's going to tell today, I don't know really that well. So that's great. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And Ivan's a great guy, really nice character. You know, he's very passionate about mental health and the evolution of sort of his mental well-being, and also helping support others. And he's done some training with me over the past couple of years, which has just been fab. So Ivan, welcome to the conversation. Please do your introduction of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So Ivan de Lantivy, half French, half English, born in London, French parents and born in London. I'm the third of four children, 52 years old, not married, but been with the same person now for 18 years. And there'll be a story about that later. And I've been in the business travel industry for the best part of 25 plus years in sales, account management and business development roles. And that's obviously where I met you, Matt.
Yeah, brilliant. And you started your own venture last year, right? So during a pandemic, you started your own piece of business.
That's right. So yeah, we can talk a little bit about the end, but I've set up with an ex-colleague of mine at Travelport. We set up 360 degrees travel consultancy.
Brilliant.
And we can mention that, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end.
Yeah, brilliant.
If we have time.
Yeah, if we have time, yeah, of course. But yeah, so brilliant that you've done that. Wishing you all the very best with that, you know, and 360 travel consultancy is the name. So let's go into the conversation, because I know you've got a story you want to tell as well. Tell us your journey with mental health. You know, you define what that looks like and you define how you answer that. So tell us a story, Ivan.
Yeah, so mine goes back basically to childhood, to my childhood days, and still resonates with me today. And hopefully the story will resonate with lots of people. I'm sure many people have been in the same, have had the same experience as me. So, you know, it's all linked to anxiety, which obviously resulted in asthma and eczema down to that when I was young. And it's all linked basically to my parents getting divorced at a very early age. But before I start and get more into detail about the story, let me give you a little bit of background. You know, my mum and dad, you know, both French. They met in the UK. My dad at the time was working for the BBC World Service. My mum was working for a tour operator, and they met in the UK. My father's the oldest out of nine. My father comes from a French aristocratic family, a very old family, whereas my mum comes from a working class family. So from a very, you know, early age, basically his parents, my father's parents, were anti him getting married to my mum. And again, that sort of explains probably a lot of what happened later. But, you know, I came from, I'd say, from a normal childhood, you know, being brought up in South London, two brothers, one sister, normal childhood. Although I do remember my parents arguing, you know, shouting, arguing, and then there was some physical abuse from both sides actually when I was younger, and I just thought that was normality. And again, people listening to this will probably say, well, this is normal, this happens at home all the time. Then from a very early age, you know, when I was six and a half, I remember my father was also drinking at the time, and again, I'm sure that had a lot to do with what happened later. But as my, you know, when I was 6.5 years of age, one weekend, my mum told my father that she was going away for the weekend, in fact, to West London, to stay with friends, with the four children. And we all packed our bags. I was wondering why we were packing like my teddy bear, or, you know, all the stuff that kids have. And in fact, the next thing I knew, the next day, we were on our way to Portsmouth, to take the 9-hour crossing to St Malo. And you know, I thought, well, that's the weekend away, because at that young age, most kids, you know, I'd say 6, know what's going on, but you're still very sort of young in your head, and you really don't really know what's going on. So I was a bit surprised about this. Next thing I know, we arrive in St Malo to be met by a friend of my mum's. We're taken to a place in Brittany near Saint-Brieuc, and in some sort of open community area where lots of other children were, etc. And I realised at that point that the weekend away was a little bit more permanent than that. And it turned out that my mum had actually left my father with the 4 children without telling him where she, you know, so that was that. So we were then you know, brought to this place, this open community. I was sort of separated from my brother, my younger brother, who I'm very close to, my older brother and sister. During that period, I developed, you know, again at a young age, anxiety, which led to asthma and eczema, and some bouts were actually very strong, and again, which resulted in me having blotches all over my body at a young age, which actually went on for quite a few years, and asthma attacks, and again, a lot of that was linked to anxiety. Now, during you know, during that year, because this is 1976, I was in an environment which was totally alien to me, hated it. I was fighting with the people around me. I was fighting with my mum. I very quickly realised that the people around my mum were bad influences, unsavoury characters, didn't really like what was going on. And this went on for obviously the best part of a few years, when at one point my mum, with the person, I think my mum in a way was being brainwashed by this person, and she sent me away. She sent me to her father's place in Le Havre in Normandy, which, to be honest, you know, I felt neglected. I felt as though I was being pushed to one side. But in hindsight, it was probably one of the best 6 months of my life, because I got away from this environment that I absolutely loathed and hated. And I was brought up by my grandfather, who's passed away at this moment in time, and my auntie, who was my mum's half sister, and she was 18. So I sort of, for the next 6 months, had a sort of normal family upbringing, where my auntie used to take me to school. But again, I was all by myself. I'd left my younger brother behind, which was, you know, playing on my mind a lot, because, you know, he was a lost soul. My older brother and sister, I still believe to this day, they knew what was going on when my mum decided to make that move to France. You know, they were 12 and 10, I think, at the time, whereas I was 6 or 7. My brother, 6. My younger brother was 4 and a half. So he obviously didn't know what was going on. He was left behind, and for the next year, you know, I didn't realise that my father was actually trying to get custody of my brother, my younger brother, and I. The 2 older ones had made their choice. They were on my mum's side. You know, at that age, you can't really choose. Do you want to be on your mum's side or your father's side? But ultimately, I still knew at that age I wanted to be back in the UK. I did not want to be in France, despite the fact, you know, my grandfather was looking after me really well. I enjoyed, you know, far preferred it there than where I was in the past. And I just remember one morning, you know, a year into that, so we're now talking 1977. A car turned up. I was playing football in the courtyard by myself, and a few lawyers, and my father's brother turned up and asked me a very simple question: do you want to be back with your father, or do you want to stay living with your grandparents and your mum? In hindsight, and I made a very quick decision. I want to be back in the UK with my father. So, which broke my heart, to be honest, because obviously my mum's father was a lovely guy. They gave me a home. They gave me a normal life in a way. During this period, my anxiety, my eczema, my asthma was getting worse. And so I packed my stuff. I remember, you know, I was 7 at the time, packed my stuff, got taken into the car, got taken to Hen, which is where my grandparents on my father's side were living. And I remember this very well. I got taken there, and my younger brother at the same time had been, because my father had won the court case, and he was asked the same question, and he wanted to be back with me and with his dad. And he came running up the stairs in the Hen train station, hugged me like a lost soul. And then, you know, for the next few days, we spent it with my grandparents. We met my dad again. We then did the return trip in the other way around. So we then went back to St. Malo, and we did St. Malo back to Portsmouth with my father, and our new life in London started. So, you know, got back to the UK. My father had won the court case. My dad, he was drinking, obviously, but this is stuff that we got to know more about later, because that obviously had a big impact on my health, mental health, and the way who I am as a person, I suppose. And we got back to the UK, and one thing I forgot to say is that when we were in France, I was told I was not able to speak English, so I lost all my English at that age. So when I came back to England on that ferry, got back to Stockwell, I couldn't speak a word of English. And in fact, I know you mentioned before this, don't swear, but the first word I got to say was the F word. So and then, you know, and my father asked one of his friends, he was totally lost. He said, I've won this, what do I do? I don't know where to send to school. And it turns out one of my dad's best friends' wife was a headmistress in a primary school called Burdett Coots in Pimlico. So we went there as kids. Our life had started, you know, my father, single parent. You know, I remember not quite knowing, wondering, you know, how come all these other kids have two parents? You know, how come they've got a mum turning up to take them to school? Whereas what we had at that time was my father taking us to school. And then little by little, he obviously couldn't manage that because he had a full-time job. He was teaching as a French lecturer in London, which sometimes had evening classes and stuff like that. So we had au pairs. Most of our au pairs actually were male au pairs. I'm not quite sure why, but that obviously, you know, living, you know, not being brought up in an environment where I was surrounded by females. You know, my sister, didn't really know her that well because I wasn't brought up with her. My mum really didn't know my mum. And I was brought up in an environment with my younger brother, my father, and male au pairs, and then went to an all boys school, which obviously, in the mindset can also, you know, you don't understand. And that had an impact, I suspect, in relationships moving forward. We were made wards of court, which meant that we weren't allowed to leave the country. My father was worried that my mum would come over and take us. And whenever we met my mum, we would sort of, she would come over to London to show, to bring tourists over. And that's basically where we would see my mum, but we always had someone with us to make sure that, you know, au pairs, to make sure that we weren't being kidnapped in a way. And my asthma and eczema was again getting worse and worse during that time. And I remember, you know, I must have been about 15 now. So as we're growing up, going through my O levels, actually going back to Le Havre to spend Christmas with my mum. By this time, we didn't need our au pairs to be there, but I spent Christmas with my mum, my auntie, my grandfather, and it all came back. All my childhood came back, and I had a massive asthma attack with bouts, you know, where I had to be taken to hospital because I'd forgotten my Ventolin inhaler. And again, a lot of it could have been psychological. You know, knowing that I'd forgotten it played on my mind, and I was worrying. And I got taken to hospital, and we begged the hospital. They couldn't give me just a bit of Ventolin because it was against regulations, but we begged them, saying, you know, I could not breathe. And I think that was the first time my mum had actually seen me have an attack and realised that a lot of this is linked to, you know, childhood and the way I was brought up, and worrying and the stress. So all linked down to anxiety. But anyway, I got over that, and went back to, and again, you know, just before going to university, my father was drinking more and more, and he got taken into rehab a few times, during that period. Also, he had and again, I remember going to visit him in rehab on various occasions, and I was thinking, this is crazy. I mean, you look normal compared to some of these other people, because a lot of the other people there were people who had, my father had a drinking problem, but it was mainly wine and drinking most of the day, whereas some of these people were drinking, strong spirits and taking probably drugs and stuff like that. So they looked a lot worse than my dad. And it goes to show that don't judge a book by its cover. My dad had his own story, his own life. And again, I remember he had massive depression. He was taking tablets to combat it. And I remember on a few occasions him calling me and my brother to say that he had suicidal thoughts, which again, you don't know whether it's just a cry for help, whether he actually meant it, whether he was going to do it. You just don't know. But my brother and I had to be there for him. And we at young ages, we had to be very strong to support him. And then I went off to university. At that time, my brother and I were sort of drifting apart. He was, I was 17, 18. He was 15. I think there was a bit of, jealousy in that I was going to university. He'd gone through, and things that came out later that I won't go into in detail, but, the stuff unsavory stuff that went on when we were living in this open community, that again had a massive impact on him. And I remember him saying to me that, and even now when we have discussions about it, he said, you left me behind. But at that time, when you're a 7-year-old child, you don't realize I was not in a good place. I was unhappy. And the last thing you know is you don't realize that you are leaving, you're leaving your love, your brother behind, who's also got massive issue in a different way now. He's got over those and he's doing extremely well in his life. But the divorce had a massive impact on him in a different way. In that way, all I know is that from my perspective, the divorce, I think, has had a me. I remember my father telling me, never get married, don't make the same mistake as me. And I think that's had a huge impact on me. In my early relationships, they would never last very long. And I think I probably used to compensate some of those relationships, thinking that, and I know this sounds bad, but thinking that compensating them for my mother, because I'd never had a mum-son relationship. Now, obviously, as I got older, I'd like to think I've grown out of that. And my relationships now, as I said, I've been with the same partner for 18 years. But I think that's had a massive impact on me not getting married, not having children. Now, I know that, people say, well, my brother, my sister, they got married and they've all got their own journeys and experiences. But I know deep down that those comments from my dad, don't make the same mistake, you'll regret it, has had a massive impact on me moving forward. And also one thing that really, and again, it still plays on my mind today, and it's all, anxiety, is not once, I'm 52 now, and my mum has never spoken about the divorce, why she left my father. My older brother, my sister have never really spoken about it. We've tried to speak about it once, but it's just been brushed aside. Now I've got my own theory. I sort of know part of the reasons why my mum left my father, probably because of the drink and stuff like that. But at the same time, to leave your 4 children, to take your 4 children without a note, a message, nothing, is not the way that I would expect things to be done. But it's made me who I am today. It's made me, I think, a strong person. It's made me an understanding, a caring person. And I'm glad to say I got out my asthma. I grew out of my asthma. I still have bouts of eczema every so often when I worry, because I am a worrier. I mean, you've worked with me, Matt. I do think about things. But that's really where I've come from. So divorce, being brought up in that environment at a very young age was bad, but I think it's made me who I am today.
Yeah,
It's
and
made me a lot stronger.
and you know, thank you for sharing all of that, because that's, you know, it's not an easy story, of course, you know, when you start to go back over the reality of all of it. And I think you'd said to me, you know, you've shared this story but you've never told the whole story, and now you've told pretty much the sort of the majority of that story, which I think I feel really privileged to have sat and listened to that. And you know, it's you know, it defines you, it will, and it will have a profound impact on who you are. And you know, when we do training, and this isn't to link it into the training necessarily, but we talk about this thing called the frame of reference, and it talks around the elements of impact that you might have had in your life that make you the way you are. And there are, from what you've said, seeing, you know, some significant moments in there that have defined, you know, you as a character, and the way that you know, you react or portray yourself, or you know, do have attitudes towards certain things. And I think it's fascinating, and I'm sure there's so many people out there who will listen, or hopefully there's some people who listen who have been through similar experiences of, you know, young childhood sort of experiences with divorced parents, and or single parent families and so on. So thanks for sharing that, Ivan. I really do genuinely mean that. And you know, it's interesting to hear how you can see when your worries come up, your signs that the worries are coming. So the eczema, or maybe a bit of the asthma, or whatever it might be, because that's what we're trying to help people to understand, is it's okay to worry. It's, you know, and not saying it's okay in the sense of you please worry. It's just, when you worry, recognize it as a feeling, you know, that it's real. Yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing is to talk. I mean, I've always
Yeah.
kept it to myself, but
Yeah.
it's so important to talk to people, because so many people hold things back and then it all comes out in one go. But you know, it's important to talk about your feelings
Yeah.
and your experiences. So that's what I would say to anyone, any child, because I'm sure there are hundreds and hundreds of people, well, thousands,
Yeah.
millions,
Lots.
who
Yeah.
go through the same in
Yeah.
different parts of the world, who have gone through the same, and some were far worse off.
Yeah.
You know, people have been abused when they're kids. I mean, luckily that never happened to me, but
Yeah.
you know, my experiences, you know, is what happened, and that had a big impact on me.
Sure. Yeah.
So, you know, people need to talk about it.
Yeah.
It
No,
should not be a
absolutely.
taboo subject.
And that's it, isn't it? We want to make these subjects and these conversations accessible to everybody. You know, it shouldn't be a taboo. It shouldn't be a shame attached to it, or a stigma attached to having gone through an experience like that, or going through a mental health experience, or whatever it is, or whatever we determine it to be. And I've had some amazing conversations over the whole of this podathon with individuals who talk about stigma, discrimination, racism, you know, all the different prejudices that people expose. And we need to change that. We do need to sort of change the narrative and change the focus of it. And you know, your story is unique to you, and it's your experience that you're verbalizing in your own words. And we've only got a few more minutes, Ivan, and I feel like we're just, you know, there's so much we can do, like all of
It
these
just went on.
conversations.
Just
You
time
you
went so fast.
oh, and it has been, you know, and that's the thing. Once you get into the flow of these things, the time does fly. But I want to sort of wrap this piece around,
Yeah.
you know, where you are now and where you want to go, because I know you've got some aspirations, ambitions and things with what you're doing with work, but also, you know, you're a bloody nice guy who cares a lot about people. And you know, I'll let you say the words. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do you want to do?
Yes. So Matt, I mean, you know, I love everything you're doing, and I've told this as a friend, and also, you know,
Yeah.
I listened to your podcast. And a few years ago, when I left one of my previous jobs, Travel Corp, I came on one of your 2 day, your 1 day course at the time, when we could still talk to each other and
In a
have a
room.
cup of tea together, and,
Yeah.
in a room, and I was fascinated by, and it was all new to me, and I've always been very interested in mental health, mental well-being,
Yeah.
for no exact reason, but I've always found it fascinating to understand people's different journeys and experiences, and want to give something back and help people.
Yeah.
So I attended your course. I thought it was fascinating. Didn't you know, I read a lot about what's going on. I didn't really pursue it, but then I think it was in December, I attended your 2 day course,
Yeah.
which was again fascinating. And I think I've spoken to you about, you know, I would like to take that further.
Yeah.
I would like to try and get into, you know, counselling, and try and understand how I get into that. and, and take it to that next level to support people. So I know that you've given me some hints and tips, but that's really where I want to go and take this further. And also, you know, we mentioned 360 Degrees Travel Consultancy, which is a company I set up with my business partner. You know, again, it's still very early days, but bringing in the well-being, the wellness impact, you know, to the business travel sector, you know, as well as I do, that lot, you know, sustainability, wellness, well-being, they're the big topics at the moment. People talk about it, but not a lot's being done about it. And again, when, you know, we're preparing the ground, but when travel does pick up, you know, we would like to support companies with their travel programs and bring in an angle, you know, in RFPs or in their travel policy, you know, have something in there, one page, a paragraph that is linked to the well-being of employees, supporting people, and that's really where I see where we can make a difference and make an impact. So I really do want to bring that angle into the work that we're doing in the future.
Well, that's music to my ears, Ivan. Anything to do with well-being, mental health, supporting people, you know, the reality is right now, we need to improve the way that we work as humans. We need to improve the way that we engage with the humans and support them. And I think it's fascinating. You know, you're taking an experience you've been through in your life. You've had some training and insights into this world of mental health. Your ambition is to improve, you know, support services, whatever it was, you know, looks like in terms of the data and the company that you're going to be, you know, running. I love it. I really do. It's my catchphrase. I love it. We are at the end, and you know, love to carry on chatting. I've got another one of these coming up in a little while, so I'll have to set for that. But just want to say a huge thank you, Ivan. You are a really good friend. You do reach out to me and check in with me and send me hugs and everything else, which is just the most loveliest thing, because you know what, you often reach it at a point where I need it. And I hope when I reach out to you, it's the same reason, you know, and we can all support each other, bit of kindness, bit of caring, bit of hugging, you know, virtual, of course. We'll have that hug again one day, right?
I hope so. Without a drink this time, Matt.
Well, absolutely.
I know,
yeah, I'm not 5 months still. Even this hasn't broken me. So
well done.
It's all good, mate. It's all good. But I just want to say a huge thank you for participating in this event. As I always do at the end of these, just briefly, just for everybody listening, if you are struggling, if there is anything that's worrying you, or you've got concerns, or anything that Ivan might have mentioned or talked about resonates with you, and you've sort of got some worries or thoughts about that, no, there's always somebody to talk to. There really is. And we don't want people to feel alone, isolated, especially at this time. Thoughts can become quite intrusive at times, and we don't want people to feel low and unable to talk. So let's talk. Let's make sure we continue these conversations of mental health. Samaritans exist today in the UK, of course, for supporting people. The number's 116123. Don't feel shy to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger who is just there to listen. Ivan, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. I wish you all the very best, and I will speak to you soon, my friend.
Thanks, Matt. All the best.